Alright, I am excited about today's video. Before I get started, I'm going to go ahead and say this is Bolt Gun Metal, and that annoying hum you hear in the background that's making me have to kind of sound off with my voice a little bit is the air conditioner. This attic that I work in is very hot. I've tried to do videos without it, and I have to stop constantly to keep turning on the air conditioning and taking breaks, and I'd rather just gun through this. So hopefully you can tolerate that little hum. It's hopefully not so bad. And I'll continue with the video. So you may notice I have a stupid mustache and I have some straps on, and that's because of the subject that I'm talking about today. So today's subject is going to be healthcare and combat medicine, battlefield medicine in the grim dark of the 41st millennium. We are going to look at what combat medicine would look like for the Imperium, possibly the Space Marines, and maybe a couple Xeno forces just for fun. Mainly, what I'm going to do is use my own experience as a combat medic from 2012 to 2016 in the Army to come up with a realistic idea of what it means to be a combat medic on the battlefield of the 41st millennium. So, let's get started. First, we'll talk about the role of the combat medic in history and the role of the combat medic in the 41st millennium. So, there has not always been a soldier that aggresses with the infantry and treats them on the battlefield. This is a fairly new tactic. So, the 41st millennium having this totally makes sense because it's kind of based off of newer military tactics within the last 300 years, which is exactly where battlefield medicine starts to take its precedence. So, we're first going to see battlefield medicine in the form of when you go on something like a crusade. You would bring monks and men of the religions to give last rites and to carry the wounded off the battlefield. This process had a tendency to be more for the rich. I'm just going to say it. It's for the officers, for the generals and such like that, and wasn't exactly used for the average soldier. During the time of the Civil War, combat medicine still did not have a medic. That didn't exist. They had stretcher bearers, where people, and it wasn't really a assigned job, it was kind of when you weren't fighting, you could take a bunch of infantrymen and have them carry the casualties off the battlefield. So, at the time we had battlefield surgeons who were known for lopping off limbs when you were shot because of the poor medicine of the time. Now we're going to skip forward quite a bit to World War I, and this is where the combat medic is born. At this time, he is a company asset, and we're going to come back to that later, because that's what he is in the 41st millennium for the most part as well. So, just stick with that, just kind of keep this in mind, that the 41st millennium depiction of a combat medic is more akin to a World War I medic than a modern fighting medic of today's U.S. military or any other modern fighting force. So, why is that? We'll move forward. The company level medic, we're going to show this right now. This gentleman with his rifle in the air who looks kind of comfortable is the medic of this company. And you might see a company is about 100 men to 200 men at the very, very, very most, and can include artillery, vehicles, heavy weapon platforms. This is what one man is responsible for. This gentleman right here with the rifle in the air, he is responsible for all of these gentlemen coming home and finishing their campaigns. So from this idea, how in God's name is this one man supposed to keep 100 soldiers alive? So we'll have to look at what the difference between a platoon medic and a company medic is. A company medic is someone that's attached to the headquarters. See these officers here? He's connected to the officers, the standard bearer, the RTOs. He's there. Instead of being connected to something like these, the platoons of actual infantrymen who close in. That would be a platoon medic. A platoon medic or a line medic is a soldier that's directly connected to the infantry and will fight as an infantryman until someone is wounded. This is not what we see in Warhammer 40k for the most part. Usually we see a single company asset, a single medic. And we'll even show, when we turn him around, he has an aid bag. that is what's called an aid bag. And if you see those 4 poles coming out the top, that is for a stretcher, so that he can carry somebody. So he's a lot like a World War I medic in that case, but the aid bag he's carrying, I am actually wearing right now, and we'll take a look at that now. The aid bag he's wearing is a quick detail that I'd like to show. This is my aid bag. It's been marked for training, but I was able to keep it. This is my U.S. Army aid bag. It is the M9 aid bag. It is good for about 2 or 3 patients, and it's good for light patrols and dismounted operations. There are better options, bigger, better bags that can carry more, but this is the standard U.S. Army issued M9 aid bag that every single combat medic will train with. So this is the standard issue bag, and mine says combat medic just for training. It was marked for training. Okay, so this bag is going to kind of come to the story of what it would be like to be a grim, dark medic. So this bag, as I said, is good for 2 to 3 people. But didn't I just say that the company medic is in charge of up to 100 lives or more? Well, that's the problem. This amount of medical supplies that he could carry on his back, no matter how sophisticated or futuristic, unless it is a 3D printer that can 3D print gauze, chest covers, needles, and all the things that he'll need, it's just not going to happen. Let's say we actually know that in the 41st millennium they use IV bags. We've seen art of them using IV bags. An IV bag, you can't, look at this bag. It's a backpack. I don't have magical amounts of space. Let's see if I can get this to open. You can organize it like this, and you would do hemorrhage, airway, breathing, and circulation at the bottom. Circulation is this space at the bottom. If you can see, there's a little space. That's where you would put 2 to 3 bags of fluids, and you would have like some IV fluids that are just saline, and you would have a thing called Hextend that acts as fake blood until you can get real blood from a transfusion. So the amount of supplies that company medic, the model, is carrying is only enough for maybe 3 to 5 men. So if they were to suffer a mass casualty situation, and just to get a definition, mass casualty is actually considered anything more than 1. I know that sounds kind of silly, like 2 people is a mass casualty. Well, yes, because I only have 2 hands and I can only treat 1 person at a time. So if I have 2 people with several severe injuries that I need to treat, it can become a mass casualty. So let's say this guy has 5 serious casualties at the same time. He's got 1 guy missing a leg, 1 guy missing an arm, 1 guy who's been shot with a bolter, 1 guy who his throat has been lacerated, and 1 guy whose eye has been peppered with shrapnel. All of those are serious injuries that are going to take 3 to 10 minutes to get proper treatment for, like to get them fully wrapped up and ready for evacuation. We don't really have time. If there was 100 men that were all wounded and bleeding out, that 1 company medic, no matter how powerful, how good he is, he simply can't be everywhere at once, and it's just a numbers game. He's only going to save a certain percentage before the others bleed out just from him not getting there in time. So the idea that in the 41st millennium you would march companies of infantry with only 1 medic instead of attaching a medic per platoon makes sense. And I know you're like, how? You just explained how it doesn't. It makes sense for 40K. In the modern world, we have a thing called the press. When soldiers die, it makes a big scene on the news, and it doesn't look good, and then the recruiting numbers go down. Well, guess what? They don't have a problem with recruitment. They can just, draft anybody they want. So they don't have these same problems that you're going to experience with the regular military of today. In other words, casualties aren't going to stop them from getting new soldiers. So I'm starting to get to what I'm saying about the grimdark, and you'll start to see how grimdark the life of a medic in the 41st millennium is, and compared to others in history, it's actually very similar at times. So I'm going to take a quick break and jump right back into it, and then we'll keep going. So it's time to ask, what would be the role of the combat medic if he's only able to save 5 men and they're in battle, so 100 men are all wounded, all the company gets blown up with an artillery shell, and he's trying to fix everybody, but he can only fix 5. Why even bring him? Well, the game even has an answer. He is not attached to the platoons. He's attached to the headquarters unit, the commander, and a few veteran soldiers. My suspicion is that in the 41st millennium, the reason there aren't platoon medics, why there isn't 5 medics per company, which would be about the average, 5 to 10 medics per company would be great. That's a great amount, because you have redundancy. If one dies, you can replace him. They have no redundancy in the 41st millennium, apparently. If the medic is killed in the first 5 seconds of combat, they have no medic, which is like, good lord. And that is a lot like how it was set up in World War I, where you would have a company medic. But even then, he had like trained people that helped him with litter bearing and stuff like that. So I don't know. The idea of one medic going out into, let's say, the jungles of Catachan with his platoon or with his company, and they take some casualties, he treats some, he gets killed. Well, they have no medic at all, and it could be, I imagine, with the way the Imperium is, some time before a new medic is connected and knows how to, keep with that company. So it's like there's no redundancy there. As soon as you lose a medic, you're just out one. You don't have that. There's nothing in that slot, and it's like, so that's an issue. So we're going to talk about the Grimdark right here, and this is important. If his job is not to save the 100 men that get blown up with the artillery, what is his job? His job is to keep the 5 people around him alive. The standard bearer, the officers, the command squad. That's what it's called in the miniatures game. It's called a command squad. He can only treat the command squad. His medical capabilities don't even go outside to the other platoons. So they show us what they mean there. The medic is only able to treat officers and veteran guardsmen in the command squad. He is not expected to risk his life to go save the average soldier. The average soldier's life is simply not worth a combat medic. So this is where the huge line comes between modern combat medicine and what 40K is preaching. I'm not against anything. I love it all. Basically, it's kind of getting to the idea that maybe the soldiers don't have enough value in 41st millennium to even need a medic. Okay, I can actually argue for that and against it right here just real quick. Why they would not treat their men? Why would they let their men die? Well, because they have unlimited men to replace him. It will cost money and resources, time and effort to treat the wounded and then rehabilitate them, prosthetics, treat PTSD, disabilities, all this stuff. Some of them are going to be unable to fight at all after treatment. If he has no arms, no legs, he's no use to the fighting anymore. So it is not unlikely that the Imperium sees it that once you are severely wounded, that is it. You did what you could for the Empire, you go to the Emperor now. In the modern day military, we treat casualties like a motherfucking record just skipped. We can be, having fun blowing up a country, which is terrible. I don't agree with it, but that's what's going on. And as soon as on the radio, I've got a 9-line medevac request, repeat, I've got a 9-line medevac request, goes out, the entire radio, like there can be 20 units talking, everybody goes silent. And then the next call was like, repeat that, repeat unit, repeat that, what's your location? And you start send it, and you'll send the 9-line. And everybody will just go silent on the radios, no matter what's going on. If it's combat, it doesn't matter. People get quiet to get the bird on the ground, to get that guy out. It doesn't matter that he's a poor dude from the middle of nowhere. We don't care. You are an American soldier. We are going to give you the best medical treatment available on the planet to get you home. We have a thing called the golden hour. We work within that hour to get you in a hospital in front of a surgeon within that hour. I would rather get wounded on a battlefield than wounded in my own civilian house right now, because the Army medical system was so wired tight to function in all environments at all times, rapidly, quickly, and with an obscene amount of redundancy. And it was such a good medical system that when my men got on the bird, I knew they were going to live, because that's how good the next stage was. I was the worst medical thing there. A combat medic is the least trained medical personnel you've got. Then you've got a flight medic. Then you've got a surgeon. And that medical surgeon is the guy who's going to sew up your guy, who's going to pull out that shrapnel, and he's going to actually stabilize him enough to get him shipped to Germany where he can get the treatment he needs. That's how it would go. Now we're going back to 40K. You're in battle. You're going through the jungles, and the guy on point, the soldier up front, the Catachan soldier up front with the flamethrower, he gets hit first. The gunfire comes from out of nowhere, and the jungle lights up with orc gunfire. And when these bullets hit, we're going to start talking about the wounds now. I'm going right into it. The bullets of a xenomorph orc, it's a big boy. We're talking 50 caliber or more, like the Barrett 50 cal or more, coming from every gun that they fire. When this connects with a man, he's being blown to pieces. Most of my men that the medic would be treating are likely killed outright. That is a big difference. I think the idea is the weapons of Warhammer are so devastating that a platoon medic would likely be killed in combat, and his platoon would likely be suffering from unsavable injuries. They're getting hit with bolters that then detonate inside their bodies. They're in half. Their heads are in pieces. They are unsavable. And so that's what I believe is in the 41st millennium, is that warfare has gotten so violent, so vicious, and the weapons so efficient at killing people that having platoon medics would just end up with 5 dead medics alongside whole companies of soldiers. Having that single medic to guarantee that the command stays alive, the most trained and expensive assets they have, not to mention that you can't replace certain minds and tactics and abilities that come with commanders. So the idea in the 41st millennium is that everybody is expendable except for a small amount of people. So this is what my idea is. The modern medical system does exist in the 41st millennium, but only if you matter. That's the grimdark. You have to have enough brass buttons on your uniform and a fancy hat with some feathers on it for your ass to get on a helicopter when you're wounded. I bet they have the best medical technology that I can't even think of. But they aren't willing to use it on the masses because they just aren't worth enough to spend that medical knowledge on. So, the medic's job is to keep 5 really important assets alive, not the entire company. The company isn't worth as much. It can be replaced. They have unlimited cannon fodder. They do not have unlimited officers to lead that cannon fodder. So that is the idea, is if we are going to put let's say a lieutenant or a captain on the ground, we'll put a well-trained, seasoned medic next to him, and his job will be to keep that commander alive. As simple as that. It might be he's there for simply keeping a couple officers alive. I will tell you right now, the Army medical system of today does not react any differently no matter what rank you are. We don't actually say your rank in the 9-line medevac request for a helicopter. We don't say, we got a general here, hurry up. We don't say your rank. We say your injuries. We say your injuries and your location, and what the enemy can do. That's what we're sending. We don't care what your rank is. Once you're wounded, you're all the same rank. You're the most important rank in my mind. You're all that matters. So let's talk about me. I was a combat medic from 2012 to 2016. So it was during a time of war. I trained with the infantry the entire time. That was my part to do. During that, 1 second, I'm going to have to take a break. All right, sorry, that was my girlfriend. All right, we've established that the combat medic of the 41st millennium is likely only treating a few select officers and not spending his treatment options on the actual soldiers, very likely. Here is something I do know. The Death Corps of Krieg models do include squad medics, which is obscene. Like, it's the exact opposite. It skips the whole thing. You could have let's say each squad of Death Corps, you could have 100 Death Corps of Krieg soldiers, and they would actually have 10 medics with them. And I know it's just a soldier with a medipack, so it's technically a combat lifesaver, not a combat medic. But it's still like, so one option is to have 10 medics, and the other option is to have one. What is it that you want? Why is it that the Death Corps of Krieg, the guys that care the least about dying, have 10 medics to 100 men? It just seems like, okay, it's like all they care about is getting their men out of there. Like, that's, okay, so that's a kind of a thing there. But what I was going to talk about is me as a medic during the time I served. How would I do on a 41st Millennium battlefield? In some cases, maybe I would do okay. I know the demons and stuff, I'd be a big pussy like anybody else. I'm not saying I'm tough or anything like that. I'm saying, how would a modern combat medic do on the 41st Millennium battlefield? One, a real positive of the modern outlook is that the combat medic is trained as an infantryman once he gets to his unit, and it's obscene how deep that training is. They go so hard to make sure you're one of them. I went through that. It's an initiation phase, and I went through it many times to get to that. And it's basically they make sure you are an efficient infantryman and an efficient medic. And so basically the idea would be I would just be with the rows of guardsmen as they're moving forward. I would probably be standing next to the platoon sergeant or a lieutenant for each platoon. And once the battle starts, I'll be on the line firing a rifle. It maybe in this case I would have a las gun instead of an M4. So that would be that. The difference, I guess, would be that if I don't think I have the right mental mentality is what I'm going to get at. My mental mentality is that all my brothers are coming home or I'm not. That's my mentality. Everybody on the battlefield who's on my side, we're going to come home together or I'm not going to come home. It's that hard. I'm going to go that hard. The idea of ignoring the wounded just because of their rank is not something I'm mentally suited for. I'm going to go ahead and say I'm too big of a wimp for that. I can't imagine, and I'm going to give an example from history, a couple right now, that actually speak exactly to what this is about. So, there is a poem. I don't remember how it goes, and I don't think you want to hear me recite poetry, but anyway, it goes like this. It is basically that during the time of the Revolution, a bunch of men were on a line, as you can imagine, a formation of line infantry. So a bunch of guys like this, ducks in a row like army men. They're marching forward, and the first volley comes, and the guy next to him, to the rider, is hit, and he falls to the ground. And the officer, calls, follow my orders, continue firing. And so instead of being able to reach down and hold his friend in his last moments of life, he instead had to keep firing his weapon and ignored the pulls at his trousers as his friend pulled at his pants, begging for help. He ignored him until he slowly died and ended up fighting the battle instead of helping his friend. This mindset is something I just don't have. I was trained to put everybody else in front of myself. I don't care about killing the enemy. I never have. It's part of the job, but I'm really there to just save my men and make sure they come home. So the idea that you couldn't save them because of a rank, like even when you could with these hands and you weren't allowed to because of a rank, is stressful. So think about this. In a battlefield situation, I was actually allowed to treat enemy combatants if they weren't killed. So if they were wounded and were still alive, I could actually treat them, call a 9-line bird for them, and get them that beautiful medical system that we have supplied for the army soldiers. I could actually get it for the enemy. And it was expected of me to do that. And I was okay with that. That, hey, you fight me, you get wounded, I'm okay with treating your wounds. I'm sure I'd feel some type of way if you killed one of my friends, but I do what I gotta do. Oh my God, could you never do that in Warhammer 40k? Ever. The enemy is not something that you would even see as human. The dehumanization level would be full out. If you saw a wounded orc, you shoot it. You would never treat it. And so that eliminates another part of it. Is like the enemy is a fully dehumanized monster force, basically, that is totally clean to kill without feeling any type of way about it. I think that makes the combat of the 41st millennium much easier in a sense, because you're not killing people with women and children and families. You're killing monstrous demons with horns or xenomorphs or orcs or something of that effect that's really not mentally, other than the fact that it's mentally draining to fight them, it's the fact that you don't have to feel any type of way each time you pull the trigger. You're not like, oh no, I killed an orc. Like, it was gonna freaking rampage through your whole people and destroy them and eat them. Like, of course you shot it. You should be proud of that in a sense. And it's like, war nowadays, you're just fighting other humans. And it's like, so it does change a bit of the perspective. Another thing is like, I like to imagine, like, I think I'm just going to go ahead and go with one more history thing and do my final example and call it. I met some veterans while I was at my unit that they were in my unit in the past. They served during Korea. And I met the medic that was in my platoon back in the 50s. And, he said I had the honor of being Able Company 1st Platoon's medic. And I said, holy shit, that's me. And I had a goofy mustache at the time, because medics love to have a goofy mustache because it makes us look older or different. I don't know, but almost all of the medics on the line, we would grow a really dumb mustache at some point. So I have kind of grown this dumb mustache to kind of go with this video in a sense before I shave it off for later. I don't know if I'm gonna keep it. But anyway, besides the mustache. Okay. He told me that his company of 100 men was killed down to 7 people, and he had to treat all of them that slowly died in front of him. And so, you want to talk about apocalyptic Warhammer warfare, he saw it. He straight up saw it. One of the medics said my carbine was underneath a dead body, and I got rushed by I think it was either a North Korean or Chinese soldier, and he had to pull out his .45 and kill him in close combat with his .45. And it's like, just imagine you're treating somebody, you try to grab your rifle, you can't, you pull your .45 and you engage the target and then continue treating. That is some Warhammer stuff. I mean, you can just picture a medic runs up and grabs the commander and is trying to drag him, and then, he has a rifle, he shoots it, an orc shoots the gun out of his hands, he pulls out his last pistol, takes out an orc, takes out another one, and keeps dragging the lieutenant to safety kind of thing. It's like, you can see where the elements of history totally are written into Warhammer there, and it's really great. Is it an accurate portrayal of combat medicine? Well, not really, because it doesn't actually show anything that would happen after they're wounded, such as evacuations, aid tents, hospitals, all that kind of stuff that would have to be set up, evacuation routes, all kinds of things like that. We don't hear a lot about that, and that is actually part of it. Just being able to patch up a wound isn't going to do anything for somebody who needs blood, surgery, or anything else. Even with advanced medical stuff, you probably need to get them off the battlefield. I don't think they can just stay there after having legs blown off. They're going to need to go to some place for rehabilitation. So I think that's kind of lacking. We're not going to see that. We don't see an evacuation system at all. And at one point I was in charge of and manning ambulances, combat ambulances. It was the Stryker armored personnel carrier ambulances. So I was using those to evacuate casualties pretty often, and they're fantastic futuristic vehicles that can carry up to 10 ambulatory casualties and 4 serious casualties on a litter. So it's a very good system, but you don't really see that. You actually don't see a single ambulance model in all of 40K. So that's what I'm saying. There's no medical evacuation, which means even if they did have medical systems, you'd only be saving people for a short amount of time before they need blood and die, don't get the surgeries they need, or just lay there without legs. So lacking an evacuation description of any real type of how that would go, we don't really know how it would work. The idea that they could evacuate an entire, okay, they send 2 billion soldiers into battle and 8 million are wounded in a day, no small aid station is going to be able to handle casualties at that rate. At one point, we had 80 casualties come on a training thing. It was a training operation, and we had 80 casualties during a mass cal training operation. It took us several hours to triage them and have them all shipped out to the next stage. And it's like, that's 80. We're talking about 8 million. if it takes us that many hours, how many people are just going to die in the meantime? So it's like the amount of medics they would need. Here's just an idea. Their two most popular jobs in the U.S. Army are infantry, medics. Those are the two most you need of, and you can imagine why. Like, you need medics for the platoons, and it's like that's how it is. And it's like the idea of the medic not being connected directly to the platoon, one medic per 20 to 40 men. That is ideal. It's something that I think Warhammer could easily implement. It's just a single model that should be in with every 40 men or so. And it should, I don't know how it should play out or how he should be used, but there's two things that combat medicine does for the battlefield. It's not just saving people. It actually has another effect that the military cares a little bit more about sometimes. It's called being a combat multiplier. Having medics around has a tendency to get your military force a little more confident and a little more capable on the battlefield and a little more willing to close in and destroy the enemy. In other words, you become more dangerous when you put medics on the battlefield because your men get a better sense of, like, I can survive this battle. They get a sense of, like, indestructibility in a sense. That's what they mean. Your men literally become more dangerous when you add a medic. And not to mention how they react if the medic is killed. They go apeshit. They get very violent. So basically what I've tried to depict is the idea of what it would mean to be a grimdark medic and the things that we would look at and what that would actually be like. Here's some ideas for technology that I saw that you might see as a grimdark medic. There might be an infrared lens that goes over the eye that when looking at the arm or the body, you would see the vascular systems. And in other words, you would see the veins glowing so that when you go to get vascular access or whatever it's called, when you go to get access through the vein, you're going to basically not be able to miss because you just put the lens over, the veins glow, and then you stick. That's the kind of technology they might have. They might have better versions of, like, maybe a gel or something that you put into the wounds that works better than combat gauze and tourniquets that we have now. Not to mention all their capabilities with replacing limbs. They have quite a bit of machine technology to do that. So, final part I'm going to break off with is just a quick story to give the idea of what it means to be a line medic, a combat medic in the grim dark of the 41st millennium. So stay here. We're going to jump right into it right now. A single platoon medic is attached to a company, so it's just one combat medic with 100 men. They are marching through an environment that we're going to look at right now. Marching through an environment like this, they move towards that green tree and that gray building in the corner, when suddenly they take contact. The 100 men that are here quickly become cannon fodder to the massive machine guns fired by the orcs from a distance. Men are falling everywhere, even officers. Who do you think the medic is supposed to pay attention to? All of these men over here are blown apart by machine gun fire, laying on the ground begging for help. These Cadians are all wounded, some are crawling without their limbs. But here the medic stands as the standard bearer waves his flag, and the officers of his small command squad stay alive. He's disappointed as he sees that men and tanks are destroyed and men are dying, and there's nothing that he can really do. He watches as the entire squad of Catachan to his side are blown apart by machine gun fire and artillery. He watches as they beg for help and beg for medics, but there are none to go, and he must hold his ground. Here he stands. The officer is still alive, and the other soldiers are barely hanging on. Above him he hears aircraft that are capable of evacuating these men, but it doesn't have to, and it won't. There's only 3 officers on the battlefield, 1 lieutenant and a couple of captains, and he knows that that is the only job he has here. He looks to his right and sees one of the officers is dead. He has been shot and killed, and most of his body is mangled. Having said that, he is expected to still try to treat this obviously dead body because of the high rank of the captain that was killed. He treats the dead body while people who around him could really use it,
He even sticks an IV in a body that is dead to prove that he did his best to treat this officer. Inside, the medic feels some form of disappointment, but his job is done. He watches the other two officers when finally the order to fall back is given. They move over a crowd of over 75% of the unit laying dead on the ground. The medic feels as if he has only failed because he was unable to save the one officer, and is supposed to forget about the 100 men that were killed, because not long after, the entire unit is replaced with another 100 cannon fodder soldiers, and the officers, a new one replaces the one that was killed, and now his job is to protect just those 3 officers once again. When they go to combat once again, he will see another mass killing of all of his men, but still his job will remain just to protect those few officers around him. He wishes he could do a little bit more, but at the same time is happy about the safe location he often finds himself in the rear with the officers.
If you made it this far, then you got to see a small depiction of what it means to be a grimdark medic and how horrible it really would be. As somebody who went and did the shit with the infantry as a medic, I have to say I want nothing to do with being a grimdark medic in the 41st millennium. I'm happy with my miserable combat medic in the 21st millennium life. I think that's more of what I could tolerate. So hopefully we all have an idea of what healthcare and combat medicine and battlefield medicine is, what its history is, and what it would look like in the 41st millennium. Hopefully you can use this for your lore or any stories that you're creating. If you have questions about medical systems and treatment and stuff like that, that is something I still consider very interesting. So thank you for listening. This is Bolt Gun Metal. I can't believe you listened to me for 36 minutes, but I appreciate it. I got that air conditioner off and I'm already cooking. So thank you for listening. I hope that last part didn't sound too stupid and actually made some kind of point. But thank you, Bolt Gun Metal again. Thank you for listening.